Hello, everyone, depending on where you are, good morning and good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us for this webinar, Introducing Ribbon Voice Threat Prevention. My name is John Ryan from the Enterprise and Channel Marketing team, and today we're pleased to have many of our top partners with us. And we're really going to look at how enterprises that you're serving are under increasing pressure to mitigate fraud, and the path to maintain a secure communications network it really needs a unique approach. And so we're pleased to really launch Voice Threat Prevention, which is an integrated suite of analytic solutions designed to protect enterprise voice communications from illegal robocalls, fraud, and DDoS attacks. Today, our speakers are Walter Kenrick, Senior Director of PLM for Analytics, and Ram Ramanathan, Senior Director of PLM for Call Trust and SBC. But first of all, we're going to have David Hogan, our VP of Strategic Alliance and Growth Segments, who's going to speak just a moment to make an executive welcome for all of you here, our partners, and then he'll transition things to Walter. Dave, are you with us?
I am. Thanks, John. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Good deal. Good morning, everybody. Just wanted to say thank you guys for attending the call this morning. You know, certainly we're all aware of the challenges of attacks that occur from a DDoS or a TDoS standpoint with regards to voice over IP networks. You know, the one thing that I wanted to comment on is I was doing some reading last night, and there's a strong emphasis in terms of, you know, hackers and attackers on the development of IoT bots into a DDoS environment. So I know Ram and Walter will be speaking about that, but there was a report that showed last night that there were over 1 billion bot attacks for DDoS into, you know, voice over IP networks last year. And certainly we've seen some announcements over the last 6 to 8 months, you know, regarding organizations that have been hit by that at a service provider level as well as at an enterprise level. So, you know, we believe that the technology we've created here, you know, offers meaningful value to, you know, enterprise organizations and businesses that have large scale, you know, unified communications networks, as well as to each of you as partners that are looking to drive a stronger managed service offering into your customer bases as well. So the goal of this, right, is to enable you as partners to be able to provide a more comprehensive solution into your, you know, customer community that allows for, you know, a secure environment, a more manageable environment, you know, as well as a more intuitive relationship as you're providing, you know, support services and resources into your organizations that you deal with on a daily basis. So, you know, for me, contextually, I think about, you know, the voice networks that you're either, you know, reselling or selling, or you're an agent on behalf of, along with, you know, the smart hands and smart eyes that you have available, along with the applications and tools that make up, you know, that complex management environment there. This gives you the ability not only to provide a better solution, but at the end of the day, you know, puts more money in your pocket from a contribution margin standpoint as you look to provide a, you know, a recurring stream of revenue in a growth environment to your customers. So just wanted to, you know, take a couple minutes here, provide some comments there. With that, I'll turn it over to the esteemed Walter Kenrick.
Great. Thanks a lot, Dave. Appreciate the opening comments, and thanks for everyone attending today. I think we have a pretty well-rounded agenda to kind of cover a lot of this area around voice threat prevention. We want to talk about certainly what the solution is, some of the market dynamics, but also go into some of the use cases that we see. And then we want to kind of tail off and, you know, what are the opportunities for you? What are the value for our customers? How do we package and price this particular solution? Where do we cut down the various responsibilities between us, you and the customer? And then really just kind of a call to action. And if there's any questions, you can certainly put them in the chat, the questions area. And if you can interrupt, we're more than open to that, to have more of a free-flowing dialogue. So just to kind of kick things off, you know, we all kind of know this. You have your traditional voice infrastructure. It was all kind of contained within a traditional office environment, but that is no longer anymore. Obviously, with COVID and a lot of movement towards remote workers, branch offices, you really need to have a more comprehensive approach, especially as you're tying into a kind of a zero trust environment. And so the world has really changed, whether your contact center is fully distributed, certainly your knowledge workers, as people move to Microsoft Teams, or they move to Zoom, or they move to other UC providers. How do they deal with remote agents or branch agents? And so there's kind of no one central point that you can just target and say, well, this is the only entry point into my network. There's multiple entry points, and so we need to be able to protect all of those. SBCs are great for those point solutions, but when you're looking at the entire network, how do I see when one attack is hitting one portion of my network, and how do I take that knowledge and prevention and pass that on to other areas of the network? That's what we want to do today, and talk to you about how we can provide that real-time security within this particular environment. And if we look at enterprises, especially with SIP-based communications, there's open to a lot of different vulnerabilities. As Dave was mentioning around the bots that create DDoS type of attacks, certainly as well as telephony denial of service attacks are relevant to these types of environments. And so you need to look at how do you handle all of those. And enterprises, kind of what we have seen, are thinking about how they address these issues, but they need help. They need help in terms of how do they deal with the home and remote workers, and especially as they're in an unsecure environment. Certainly, traditionally, next-gen firewalls say, well, we can secure your voice network, but we have a lot of knowledge around those firewalls, and they just really don't understand SIP. And certainly, if you Google SIP application layer gateway, ALG, you'll find out that those next-gen firewalls tell you to turn it off because it impacts the voice network, which is kind of ironic that they're pushing out there. But as you look at these enterprises, they're not immune to robocalls. I'm sure we all get them in our life on a daily basis. We have spoofing, neighborhood spoofing, which is trying to use basically make you think that there's calls that are coming from your neighborhood, or Wayne Geary, one ring and cut type of scenarios, DDoS attacks, TDoS attacks that are happening across the network, especially in contact centers. How do you avoid your entire IVR system from being shut down because of a TDoS attack? You need to be able to protect it against that. Then you certainly have your fraud and your UC PBX being hacked, and we have some examples on that through some of the use cases. So we're really trying to expose that the enterprises need to have a higher level of knowledge on how they can protect their network across the entire span. We have a couple of examples, and these are real examples that were customers that we've worked with primarily on the analytics side. But there was a consulting company, and the carrier that they were working with said, hey, you guys are getting a large number of international calls. And so when they started really kind of digging into it, they found out that their conference bridge was being leveraged, used illegally by a bad operator, a bad actor. But the numbers that were coming in was certainly a legitimate DID. And so this was just happening, kind of a random basis, but, over, multiple times over a month. And the charges were over $100,000. That's a huge sum that they were being hit with. And that's the whole goal of toll fraud, is for revenue. And so what they initially did was they worked with the carrier, and they were able to block that particular calling party number. Well, that was great, and it certainly solved the problem. But these bad actors, we all know they're very smart, and after a number of weeks, they issued return. The bad actor, caught on that he was being blocked, and just used a different calling party number. And so the entire scenario played out. Now, we were able to help them identify these type of things that were happening within our analytics, but we need to have that real-time component, and that's where the voice threat prevention comes into play. The other example was a big food manufacturing company that we worked with. And here's where they suspected there was some type of theft or dial-through fraud that was happening. They weren't really sure where it was occurring within their network. And so they did some digging, and they finally saw that a SIP trunk just had the same calling party number dialing over and over again, and then dialing out to Europe for a high revenue site. And so this was continuing to happened over a month period. And this is where you get into those big toll fraud charges in excess of 200K. So a massive amount of money that's going just flying out the door. A lot of these companies don't see it because they're not seeing visibility across their entire network, and they're not able to hone down and kind of use some of the algorithms to identify that maybe this is anomalous behavior that's happening in my network, and I need to protect against it. And so these are another example of where we're able to catch it, but we want that real-time nature, and using some machine learning techniques to be able to attack and see that we have the same calling party number dialing over and over again, maybe making short duration calls. We want to eliminate that altogether and mitigate that across the entire network. There's also some market research that Metrigy actually did last year, September of last year. They came out with this report, and they asked enterprises to rate the importance of voice fraud to their overall security strategy. And they got real positive remarks. 80% of the leaders say voice security is very important. They recognize that it's important. However, when you kind of peel it back a little bit deeper, and when they were asked, well, do you have a strategy to prevent voice toll fraud in your organization? Less than half of them had any type of strategy. There was 20% that had basically what they intended a full strategy, and 28 said they had a limited strategy. So that's basically less than half that really had any type of strategy on how to deal with voice security. So huge opportunity for us in our minds that we can go and help these enterprises, because I think they're really struggling on how to get a hold of what they need to do to protect their voice network from robocalls and toll fraud type of charges that would happen in their network. We dug in a little bit deeper through this survey that Metrigy did, and they basically said, well, how are you going to implement some type of solution to mitigate these issues? Well, overwhelmingly, they said they're going to use a cloud-hosted service. Now, is that through some type of service provider or some other mechanism, which is very good news in terms of the solution that we're bringing into bear. But a big segment said we're going to use our own tools. And if you kind of look at the examples that I threw out earlier, well, using their own tools didn't really solve their problem, did it? They had a high amount of toll fraud within those two customer examples. And then you have a quarter of the people that they're really not sure how they're going to do it. So, big opportunity there. And then others, they're going to just rely on their SIP trunking provider. And then if you kind of go back to the first use case that I had, where the carrier had to block a particular number, they're not necessarily looking at any specific issues, because the carriers can't really tell which are good calls, which are bad calls that might be coming into the voice network Only if they're on some type of do not call list already will they actually block them, or maybe through some type of attestation through a stir shaking. So bottom line is enterprises really don't have a good handle on how they're going to solve this type of issue. And that's where we came up with the whole voice threat prevention solution. And so here, this is where we're taking the anomaly detection out of analytics, be able to build models, continuous feedback, and inferred learning that we can pass up to a reputation scoring model that can take all this information, take third-party data, and be able to provide models for a real-time scoring and policy decisions mechanism, and being able to pass that down back into the network for the full policy enforcement to apply any type of mitigation rules or information back in. Obviously, you need to have also the visibility through dashboards and reporting so you can get a good idea of exactly what's going to happen. So this is where we feel that we provide a value-added solution to our end customers. Now I'm going to switch it over to Ram Ramanathan. He's going to walk us through a lot more of the details on how the solution works, as well as some of the other areas with regard and use cases for the voice threat protection. So Ram?
Thanks, Walter, and good morning, everyone. So just to recap kind of what Walter kind of mentioned for the past few minutes, is basically what we're looking at is a need for a holistic threat mitigation solution from a voice perspective. So most of the enterprises, the CSOs, the CIOs are mostly focused on data-based security threats, not so much on the voice side. And there is a need as voice gets more IP-based as opposed to TDM. And as Walter discussed, some of the remote work environments with Teams and Zoom and different modalities being introduced into the enterprise network, there is a need for CSOs and CIOs to look at the voice part of the security puzzle and see what they need to do there. And Walter did present some of the market-based information, which was very helpful in looking at what is a need and where the enterprises are today in terms of addressing the need. So now, like getting into the Ribbon piece of the solution. So how does Ribbon plan to address these security threats from a voice perspective? So when we started looking at this problem, day one, we knew that we had to do a holistic solution. This cannot be piecemeal or resolve one issue here or one issue there. It has to be holistic, network-wide, end-to-end, and it should address things with the Ribbon network elements like the Ribbon SPCs and so forth, but it should also look at third-party and network elements if possible, right? So that gives you the end-to-end nature of the threat protection. So when we looked at this problem, as Walter mentioned, it is kind of twofold. One is what happens in the enterprise network. As discussed in a couple of use cases where somebody dialed in, took advantage of the conference bridge and then dialed out internationally, there are things that happen within the network that we need to look at. But it's not just that. There are things that happen outside the network. The enterprise itself may not be impacted or may not show any anomalies, but there are things happening outside the network in the carrier networks or in other enterprises where we can look at that data and proactively protect this particular enterprise network. So there is an aspect where you need to look at the data and the anomalies within a network, but also you need to look at outside the network globally and kind of use that data along with the local data, bring that together to really make some decisions based on that. So that's what we call as voice threat prevention, is the combination of local analytics and global intelligence. And local analytics is derived from the Ribbon Analytics platform that you've looked at before. And then there is an application called Fraud Protect within analytics that we use to detect local anomalies within the enterprise network. And then we have a SaaS, software as a service called Reputation Scoring that runs in the Ribbon Cloud that looks at the global intelligence, things that happen outside the enterprise network, in the global carrier networks, things that are evolving, that are not yet impacting this particular enterprise, but still things that are happening out in the world. So analytics really looking at the local data and reputation scoring, which is a SaaS-based cloud service looking at the global data. You put that together, and that is the voice threat prevention. But it's not just important to look at what's going on in your network or globally, but then once you detect some anomaly or things that are happening that are bad, you need to take action. And that's where the policy enforcement function comes in, where we take action on stopping a call or rerouting a call or whatever the call treatment options may be. And that's where we do the policy enforcement, and that can be done with an SBC. It could be a core SBC, which is it could be a core SBC, which could be SBC 5400, SBC 7000, or a SBC SWE in the virtual case, or it could be a small edge SBC, the 1K, 2K, or SWE Lite or SWE Edge, as the case may be. So we cover the gamut of the ribbon SBCs. We can also work with third-party SBCs like Oracle, Acme Packet SBCs as well. Obviously, we are more integrated with our own SBCs, but that's where the policy enforcement happens once we detect something is going wrong. And then the last piece of the puzzle is the dashboarding or the uniform visibility into what's going on with the network. And that's where we provide dashboards and reporting capabilities on what's actually happening in the enterprise network in terms of fraud, in terms of robocalling on a real-time basis. So this is the Ribbon voice threat prevention solution, along with the policy enforcement that happens with the SBCs. In some of our enterprise networks, we also have the PSX, which is the centralized routing engine that goes hand in hand with an SBC in terms of the routing functions. So we can absolutely take advantage of an SBC plus PSX network with the voice threat prevention. And what PSX offers on top of a pure SBC network is it offers some flexibility in terms of rerouting calls. As I said before, once we figure out a call to be a bad call, or kind of a gray area that we don't know what type of call it is, you may want to reroute the call instead of completely blocking it. You may want to reroute it to a low-cost geography in terms of contact centers. So PSX kind of helps with that, rerouting of calls as depending on the threat level. So as we said, the voice threat prevention solution can detect threats and can enforce policy either on a pure SBC network, or it can enforce policy on an SBC plus PSX network. Okay, so now coming to block diagrams of what pieces of network elements are involved in the voice threat prevention solution. So you have the carrier on the northbound side. These are the telecom service providers that provide sub-trunking solutions. And then on the southbound side, you have the end users, could be working from the corporate network, could be from home, contact centers, and so forth. So we bridge the gap between the carrier and the end users using our SBC and PSXs. And the SBC, which does the security functions, now it also pulls in the voice threat prevention, which we discussed before, which is analytics and reputation scoring put together. The SBC pulls in the voice threat prevention on a call-by-call basis, looks at the call, makes a determination of if it's a good call or a bad call. Good calls are let through. Bad calls, depending on the nature of the call, can be blocked, can be rerouted, and there are many different options we can do. It can be sent to announcement servers and things of that sort. So really, it is SBC and PSX is the anchor to the call flow, and it pulls in voice threat prevention solution to understand the nature of the call and then take action from that point on. In terms of the voice threat prevention solution itself, as I mentioned before, analytics looks at the local network behaviors. Reputation scoring looks at the global behaviors. It looks at third-party databases that we source from outside. Since Ribbon also plays in the carrier space, not just the enterprise space, but also in the carrier space, we do get the threat mitigation, threat data from the carriers on what's going on out in the AT&Ts of the world, the Verizons of the world, and so forth. So we kind of can mash together what we see with enterprises, what we see with the carriers globally, not just in the US, and then put together a threat response based on what's happening out there in the networks. Okay, so let's take a look at some real use cases of what happens when a bad call comes in. How does the voice threat prevention solution detect that and then eventually take action with SBC and PSXs? Okay, so this is a typical enterprise network. You have users, contact center agents on the internal side, could be working from corporate, could be working from remote, doesn't matter. So that's the enterprise network on the right-hand side. And on the left-hand side, you have the calling, the callers, basically people calling into the enterprise. And these are the green arrows show legitimate callers or good callers. So that's the network. Now let's add in the bad callers. And these could be just nuisance calls that we're used to in our mobile phones and landlines. We do get robocalls almost on a daily basis. The average is about, we are looking at about 12 to 15 calls per user per month is what we're looking at in the US, and different countries are in different stages. But really, these are nuisance robocalls. Not really, it doesn't leak revenue, but these really take up time. If you were to look at a contact center agent, robocalls take up the time of an agent, which he or she could use for a real customer. So that is one form of a threat that comes into the network. Then there are threats where, as Walter described before and Dave Hogan described, TDOS attacks, where some illegitimate entities make traffic pumping calls. Basically, they tie up the circuits, could be SIP circuits, could be TDM circuits. They just make so many calls that you tie up your IVR systems that legitimate callers cannot come into the network. So this is the telephony denial of service. There could be the regular distributed DOS, where people send illegal traffic or traffic pumping to different SPCs in the network in a distributed fashion, where for one SPC, it cannot really detect that it's being attacked because it's within the threshold level. But when you look at the network holistically with multiple SPCs, overall the network is being attacked. But for that one SPC, it doesn't really know if it's being attacked or not. But looking at holistically network-wide, the network is being attacked. So that's the DDoS side of the equation. Then there are the regular fraudsters that take control of the network. Could be a PBX, could be a conference bridge. They hack into the bridge, and then they make outbound calls to premium rate numbers and so forth. So there are these different types of calls that come into a network, along with the good calls, which are the green arrows, and the bad calls that are the red arrows. So now these calls come into the SPC. So SPC is the first point of entry, at least for SIP-based networks. Once it comes into the SPC, now the SPC itself doesn't have all the intelligence. It has some intelligence that it can look at CAC, call admission control, number of packets that come in. So it has some intelligence in terms of the traffic that's coming in, the volume of the traffic. But beyond that, the SPC itself doesn't know if it's a good call or a bad call. So that's when it pulls in the voice threat prevention solution, which is composed of analytics and reputation scoring, analytics being on-prem, reputation scoring being in the Ribbon cloud. The Ribbon SPC goes to the voice threat prevention solution and analyzes the call and sees is it a good call or a bad call. Now the blue arrow is basically a real-time lookup into the voice threat prevention solution. The purple arrows are basically that happen behind the scenes, offline, independent of the call. There is analysis going on the back end, independent of the calls coming in. So based on CDRs, based on statistics, based on external databases, based on global intelligence, there is the analysis function going on in the back end. But as and when a call comes into the SPC now pulls in the VTP function, the voice threat prevention function, to figure out is it a good call or a bad call. And the voice threat prevention function sends back a score, which is from 0 to 100, which says, is it a good call or a bad call or somewhere in between? And once SPC receives that score on a real-time call-by-call basis, it's then going to decide what am I going to do with the call. And that's where the customer's configuration comes in. If it's a real bad call, you can block it. If it is a good call, you let it go through. If it is somewhere in between, maybe you want to reroute the call to a lower cost geography, or maybe you want to send it to an announcement server. There are different types of treatments the SPC can assign to a call. And if there's a PSX, the PSX brings in more call treatment options and more routing options beyond what the SPC can do. So once the SPC decides on what the call treatment option is, then it lets the good calls in, diverts the bad call or blocks the bad call, thereby removing all the bad calls from the network from the revenue generating functions of the network. Okay, so those were incoming calls into the enterprise. Now let's look at the other side where outgoing calls are made from the enterprise towards the carriers. So, this could be users making calls to external external parties. It could be users dialing into an external bridge, which are the green arrows. But it could also be a bad actor that takes control of a PBX, takes control of a conference bridge, and then tries to dial outside. And that's the red dotted arrow there. And in this case, the bad actor has taken control of the PBX. Could be hacking, could be weak passwords, things of that sort. But the bad actor has taken control of the PBX. Now he or she's going to make a call outside towards a carrier, towards a premium rate number. And typically the way it happens is the bad actor actually sources the premium rate number, typically in a foreign country, but could happen in the US as well. But the bad actor is the owner of the premium rate number typically. So he or she sources the premium rate number and tries to pump calls towards the premium rate number so that the carrier can provide a kickback to the bad actor, right? That's how the premium rate fraud works, where you own a number and the more calls you send to that number, you get a cut out of the revenue the carrier makes. So the bad actor in this case has created the premium rate number, is taken control of the PBX, and is going to pump calls into the PBX to be destined to the premium rate number that exists outside the enterprise network. And the bad actor eventually makes a lot of money out with this. But the key point is, Walter talked about a use case where the carrier finds out, the subtrunking carrier finds out something is wrong. That may take a while for the carrier to find out, because these bad actors these days, the attacks happen for a few minutes to a few hours and they vanish, right? These actors are not going to be there forever for the carrier to figure out or the enterprise to figure out. These are fast moving attacks in the order of minutes, where they come in, do the attack, and go back, look at another enterprise. So the need for a solution is that it needs to be dynamic. It needs to understand the threats out there in a dynamic fashion, but really quickly identify the issue. And that's where the voice threat prevention is tailored to quick identification and then stopping of the issue real time. So in this case, again, the SBC, when it sees the outgoing call, it's going to again refer to the voice threat prevention solution, which has been analyzing information both in network and outside the network globally. It's been analyzing the threat landscape, and then when the SBC pulls in the voice threat prevention solution for the outgoing call, the voice threat prevention is going to return back with a score between a 0 and 100, and depending on a good call or a bad call or somewhere in between, the SBC and or the PSX is going to take an action to block such calls, or to reroute calls, or send it to announcement servers and things of that sort. But in this case, since it's a bad actor pumping calls to a premium number, they're going to block the calls. The SBC is going to block the calls, but not just that. With the visibility solution, we have the threat visibility solution, which is holistic. It's going to notify the enterprise that this action has been taken, this is the event, and so forth, so they can come and look at what's going on. So we take the blocking action, but also report or notify the enterprise that this has gone on in your network. So that kind of covers both the inbound calling, where the SBC and PSX pulls in the voice threat prevention solution and blocks calls, bad calls, and lets the good calls go in. And then on the outgoing side, it does a similar kind of pull in, and then looks at the calls and then takes action accordingly.
Great, that was a fantastic overview on how the solution works, Ram. Certainly appreciate that. So wanted to change gears a little bit, talk about some of the market opportunities, go into the pricing, packaging of the solution. So when we look at kind of the value for, what's in it for everyone, why are we pushing this out? Well, we feel there's a lot of value for our customers, for our joint customers. There's certainly the immediate value. How do we know that they have fraud, nuisance calling problems? There's lots of different types of use cases out there. They're getting hit with those every day. And here we're able to provide a very simple, out of the box scenario to help them secure their voice networks. And really, especially in the contact center world where every call is generally revenue generating, we want to avoid any type of business disruption and maintain that productivity as high as we can, whether it's across their IVRs or even getting down to the various contact center agents themselves. And they certainly, the customers will be able to take advantage of some of the innovation that we're bringing to bear in terms of the machine learning algorithms that we're bringing in, the real-time aspect of this. So not a near time, but a real-time block of any malicious type of calls. For you, our partners, we think this is a high value. Dave touched upon this to bring new revenue generating type of scenarios for you. And this, with the voice threat prevention, it's really a very simple single SKU annual subscription contract that you can easily grow. And the renewal structure is very much simplified in terms of how we want to bring it to market. It also helps continue that stickiness with the end customer. Obviously, we want to be able to sell more. We want to build those relationships with those customers. We just don't want to bring in an SBC and say, set it and forget it, so to speak. But we want to continue to build those relationships because it's going to open up new opportunities for us. So going beyond the whole voice threat prevention solution, we have a lot of different other applications that can be upsold based on this type of solution. So we view it for you as getting into new areas, whether it's with marketing, the CISO, different areas of the C-suite of these organizations, but to bring in additional value-added applications that are on subscription basis as well. We see that's a huge value and really kind of a differentiator for us, and quite frankly for you in this particular space. And obviously for Ribbon, we're looking to expand our market opportunities, revenue growth. You're a pathway into the enterprise. We value that. And so we want to be able to continue to drive that and bring innovative type of solutions to you. So our whole mindset is, how do we move up that value chain with things like analytics, machine learning, SaaS applications, cloud hosted applications that we can help you win more deals, because we both win at that. And quite frankly, all three of us, the customers, you, our partners, and Ribbon, we all win when we bring these value-added solutions to market. Now, as we look at kind of step back and we look at, well, where should you target? Where do you start? There's a couple of different areas. Obviously, we have a huge install base within our SBC and SBC PSX environments. And here, this is obviously a great opportunity to bring this whole voice threat prevention solution to those existing customers. They're, I would say, probably one of the top areas that we should target jointly in terms of getting this solution into the enterprise hands. If they already have analytics installed, then that's great. If we have a number of customers, we have close to over 100 analytics customers, a big majority of them in the enterprise right now. They may only have our Discover application, which is the network operations. And so this is as we talked about bringing new solutions, upselling the customer, this is a perfect opportunity to upsell the voice threat prevention because they already have the analytics platform. All they need to do is add in the Fraud Protect application and tie it in with reputation scoring service, and they're ready to go. So they already have the platform. They're just extending the applications on top of that platform, which is exactly what we want to do within analytics. And if they already have Fraud Protect, then we can certainly just upsell the reputation scoring service very easily. It makes it very seamless. We've done that in the past, and we've found a lot of success in tying that together. And certainly there's new opportunities. And what we mean by new opportunities, if we're going into more of a greenfield site where they don't necessarily have our SBCs or PSX, and you're pitching that, we should layer in this type of solution because we know that they're going to run into security type of problems within their voice network. We want to be able to help them. We think, by just adding this in creates a huge differentiator in these new opportunity sales. And so we want to bring the whole voice threat prevention solution to those. Put the line item in, have the customer pull it out, but our feeling is that they're going to need it to protect their network, and we can use that as leverage against the competition. There's also opportunities if you want to have kind of more of a Trojan horse where there's third-party SBC environments such as Oracle or whatnot. We can bring in, as Ram mentioned earlier, we can bring in the voice threat prevention solution, kind of seed it with our analytics. So we already have integration with Oracle today, tied in the reputation scoring, and pass mitigation back down. So here we kind of use that, and that opens up the doors not only for future applications, but maybe additional SBC sales, which obviously helps your bottom line. So Ram, let's transition over. Let's talk a little bit about some of the packaging and pricing. Okay.
Sure. So you heard about the kind of the target segment where we'll have good success in terms of existing Ribbon deployments, but also third-party deployments. Now let's take a look at the commercials, or how does this kind of solution come together from a commercial invoicing billing perspective. So as we discussed before, voice threat prevention has two components. One is Ribbon Analytics, which is specifically the fraud protect application within Ribbon Analytics, and the reputation scoring service, which is a cloud-based SaaS service. So each of these are different, slightly different in terms of how we measure things, how we build things. And as you can see on the slide, the SaaS service is more, as we say, it's software as a service, so it's more in tune with monthly subscription. And it's based on transactions per month that the customer puts in. Typically, it's one transaction per call, but we measure by transactions per month, and we bill on a monthly basis. And if they go over the purchase limit, then we bill in arrears monthly. On the analytics side, it's based on events. It's not based on transactions, but it's based on events per day, and each call could have one event or multiple events depending on the type of the call, but it's based on events per day. The pricing or the billing is annual, and then if there is any overage on top of what they purchased, then the true up is quarterly. So as you can see, that the metrics are slightly different between the two services. But what we've done is, in the next slide, what we've done is we have simplified this for the enterprise, which with the voice threat prevention bundle, where you don't have to look at these multiple solutions, the analytics and the reputation scoring. We bundle it together commercially into one single SKU. So basically, this is targeted towards enterprises, the large enterprise verticals that have less than 5 million calls per month. And that should address about 80% of the enterprise market. And this is, if you want to look at 5 million calls a month, it equates to about 5 calls per second, or it equates to about 5,000 users, enterprise users, or about 500 contact center agents, as you can see on the slide. So that's kind of the market that we want to hit with this package. And if it's a larger customer, the big banks, big insurance companies that do more than 5 million calls a month, you can work with the Ribbon channel account team on putting together a custom quote. But this specific package, just to keep it simple and address about 80% of the market, is to have a single SKU for the bundle, and it's priced at about $2,100 a month. It's priced pretty attractively, $25,000 per year for the complete fraud and robocall protection that includes both the local intelligence and the global intelligence, and that's the price. And there is a one-time onboarding service, just to keep it simple and easy to onboard customers. It's a one-time fee of $19,940 that includes both the analytics onboarding and the reputation scoring onboarding. So Ribbon will come and set up both on-prem analytics and the cloud-based reputation scoring for one flat fee. So this is a simple bundle, one SKU for the product, one SKU for services, and we're done. And this should address most of the customers in the enterprise space. And as I said before, for the larger customers, let's work with the Ribbon channel account team and do a custom quote, because things are usually different. With the larger enterprises, we cannot do a one-size-fits-all. Okay, so just some responsibilities at a high level between Ribbon and the partner. So we are making the solution available to the direct partners first. So in terms of sales on both the reputation scoring and the analytics, the complete voice threat prevention solution, sales is led by the direct partner. Invoicing is also by the partner to the end customer. When it comes to the deployment environment, reputation scoring is obviously a Ribbon SaaS service, so we manage it from the Ribbon cloud. Analytics could be managed by Ribbon or by the partner. The partner can supply hardware for analytics, or we even have an Amazon-based analytics service now that can be utilized if you don't want to put any servers on-prem. So deployment is kind of split between Ribbon managing it and the partner managing it. Onboarding services, initially, it's going to be handled by Ribbon just to keep it simple. But as things evolve, as we get more customers, we can train partners to onboard the voice threat prevention customers themselves. But initially, it's going to be handled by Ribbon just to keep it simple. And then ongoing support, day 2, day 3 support is going to be from a reputation scoring. It's going to be Ribbon because it's a Ribbon managed service. And from an analytics perspective, level 1 calls can be handled by the direct partner.
Okay. Well, great, Ram. Appreciate you going through all of that. I know we're kind of closing in towards the end. We want to take a few questions here, but just kind of wrap up. As we go through this whole voice threat prevention solution, we want you to come away thinking about, how can you go to your customers, think about what their business problems are? How do we raise the view of voice security, and that is now a must-have, especially as everybody's talking about zero trust type of networks. We want you to learn the use cases. We have many more use cases that we can also bring to bear, but we started off with some of the basic ones that we see a lot and that we can absolutely help prevent within those enterprises. And as you go into your whole sales strategy, as you talk to people within your organization, figure out who the customers are that you want to target, certainly focusing on those Ribbon customers with Ribbon devices are, I think, your easy place to start. If they already have an SBC or PSX, we want to start there. And this is an opportunity for you also to establish your voice domain expertise. You are the expert in voice security, and so you can talk to them on how you can solve those enterprise customers, with this type of solution. You can also bring in that subscription revenue, so bringing in constant flow month after month of additional revenue through a very simple means of ordering and bringing a solution to your end customer. And finally, we really feel that the whole voice threat prevention is a differentiator. We've seen that time and time again in some of the accounts that we're already in and that we've been talking to, whether they're service provider or enterprise type of customers. They really are looking for that real-time aspect. How do we stop any type of anomalous behavior in our network before it becomes a problem? They don't want to see 50, 100K type of bills from their service provider. They want to stop that immediately. They want to stop it, especially as their geographic presence expands, not only the US, but globally. How do they help secure their network from any type of voice attacks? We have a lot of different information out on the partner portal. There's a solution brief, the playbook. We're going to post this webinar up there. So we encourage you to go and take a look. Obviously, if you have any additional questions, you can certainly reach out to us, reach out to your channel account managers that you work with on a regular basis, and we're more than happy to go into a lot more depth on this particular solution for you. So with that, I see we have a couple of questions. And so Ram, one question that I see is the request from the SVC PSX to the reputation scoring service, is that in band or out of band?
It's in band in the sense that when a call comes in, we refer to the voice threat prevention solution real time, or there is a query going real time. We are actually stopping the call. We are doing a lookup, and based on the response, we're going to take action on the call. So it's really in band or real time is how I would say that.
Okay, great. There's another question about competition. So they mentioned they know Oracle has a solution, Secure Logic. How do we stand up and measure against those type of competitors with this whole voice threat prevention solution?
No, great question. So yes, there are solutions available in the market today. Oracle has it, Secure Logic has it. There are a few other smaller players that are dabbling in the space. But yes, there are solutions available. The way we differentiate is that we integrate the voice threat prevention solution very well with our own SPCs and PSXs and the IP intellectual property we have within Ribbon. I mean, obviously, we do work with third parties as well, but we do a much better integration with our own devices. So that is number one. Number two is that, as we discussed before, this is not the only service that we are offering. Obviously, this is the Trojan horse. We get in through the service, but there are other services that we are planning on in the future that we can explain in a different webinar. But there are other value-added services that are coming behind the voice threat prevention. And also the nature of the threats are changing. As we discussed, I think, Walter, you brought up a couple of use cases where the carriers kind of helped mitigate some of the threats after the fact, but that takes time. And as I said before, some of the threats that are happening in the market today are pretty fleeting or pretty dynamic. They happen for a few minutes and go away. So how can a solution really adapt to that threat and take action within those few minutes? You cannot wait for a few hours, learn from it, and come back and take some action. You have to take it instantaneously. So Ribbon, we believe that our solution, with both the local intelligence of analytics that looks at the local network and the global intelligence coming from different networks, different carrier networks, and we have our own honeypot service that provides organic threat vectors. So with this global and local intelligence, we believe that our solution can be really dynamic, look at the threats as they're happening and take action immediately. So with the solution being customized for Ribbon and also being dynamic in real time, I think these are the differentiators that can separate us from the competition.
Great, thanks. Another question that I see here, we talked about being able to upsell some additional applications. Can you give some examples?
No, absolutely. This space is evolving. I mean, this whole voice threat prevention, fraud, robocall space is evolving. It is first taking place in the carrier networks, and eventually it's going to bleed over into the enterprise networks. So this fraud mitigation, robocall mitigation is the first phase of the evolution. But we are starting to see other things like STIR/SHAKEN, which is prevalent and mostly in the carrier networks, but it's going to bleed over into the enterprise, where enterprises may want to take control of their own attestation levels. So STIR/SHAKEN is going to make its way into the enterprise. And then there is this concept of RCD, rich call data or branded caller ID, where enterprises, when they make outbound calls, they want to put their logos. So the end customer is more likely to pick up the call when they know that there is a bank calling with their logo and maybe a reason for the call, then they're more likely to pick up the call. So there are things happening with STIR/SHAKEN, rich call data that will eventually bleed into the enterprise, and enterprises want to take control of their own destiny and not depend on the carriers. So behind the voice threat prevention solution, there are other services being lined up with STIR/SHAKEN and RCD as we look into the future.
Yeah, that's great. Certainly a platform that you can build on and move forward with. Certainly resonates with a lot of folks. So that's the end of our questions. So John, I turn it back over to you.
Yeah, great. Walter, Ram, thank you very much. Great presentation, really looking at voice threat prevention. So everyone here, thanks for joining. Of course, we're going to be continuing to work with you on the solution and how you can deploy it. And I just put in the chat window a link for our 30-second survey. Please let us know how we did. Let us know if there's anything you want to do differently, as well as if you want to speak further via one-on-one call to really discuss voice threat prevention. In addition, we'll have your partner managers follow up with you. And also, if you are aware of the partner portal, you probably use it. If you don't have a login, I will put the link in the chat right now for you to create a login. It's a pretty simple process. Otherwise, and also thank you, Dave Hogan, for leading way with your executive intro. And thanks everyone for joining us again. And we'll talk to you all soon. Thanks. Have a great day.
Bye.